Welcome back to the Quiet Hours. Tonight, we're settling into the complete story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, a game that arrived like a whisper in the night and revealed itself as something far more significant than anyone could have anticipated. Released on December 4th, 2017, this sixth installment in the Five Nights at Freddy's series came as a surprise gift from creator Scott Cawthon, wrapped in layers of deception that mirrored the very nature of the franchise itself. What began as an apparent joke, a simple tycoon game about managing a pizza restaurant, unfolded into one of the most lore-heavy entries in the entire series, bringing together threads from across the timeline into a final fiery confrontation that promised to end the cycle of tragedy once and for all. This is the story of a trap disguised as an opportunity, of souls gathering in one place for a purpose they couldn't comprehend, and of a man named Henry Emily who orchestrated the end of an era with careful precision and heavy heart. Whether you're discovering these details for the first time, revisiting familiar territory with fresh perspective, or simply allowing the narrative to wash over you as sleep approaches, this complete journey through Pizzeria Simulator's lore will guide you through every salvage, every minigame, every ending, and every word of that unforgettable final speech that brought closure to so many restless spirits. Before we begin our descent into this tale of redemption and release, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of immersive storytelling that unfolds at a pace meant for contemplation rather than urgency. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. There's something peaceful about knowing this same story weaves through different time zones, one hushed voice at a time. Let's begin. The surprise that shook the community. In the summer months of 2017, Scott Cawthon made an announcement that sent ripples of disappointment through the Five Nights at Freddy's community. After the complexity and story revelations of Sister Location, fans eagerly anticipated the sixth mainline game, hungry for answers to questions that had accumulated like dust in forgotten corners. But in July of that year, Cawthon announced the cancellation of the sixth game, stating that he had been neglecting other aspects of his life and needed to step back from the intensity of the main series. He mentioned possibly creating a lighter spin-off in the style of FNAF World instead, something less demanding on his time and creative energy. The community accepted this news with understanding mixed with sadness. The series had given them years of theories, jump scares, and late-night discussions about the nature of possession and the identity of various characters. If Scott needed a break, they would respect that decision. Then, in the weeks leading up to December, Cawthon began teasing something new. Images appeared on his website showing Freddy with a cake, Freddy near 3 children, Freddy juggling pizzas. The aesthetic was simple, almost cute in its 8-bit charm. This, fans assumed, was the lightweight tycoon game he had mentioned, a pleasant diversion from the darkness of the main series. When Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator appeared on Steam on December 4th, 2017, completely free to download, players approached it with modest expectations. Here was Scott's promised spin-off, a management simulator where you could build your own Freddy's location, customize menus, entertain children, and watch your business grow. The initial screens supported this interpretation entirely. You designed pizzas with various toppings, selecting from pepperoni, onions, olives, sausage, mushrooms, and peppers, then confirmed your creation with satisfaction. The game invited you to proceed to the actual pizzeria, where you would begin your entrepreneurial journey. What happened next became one of gaming's most effective trolls and one of the franchise's most memorable moments. Players found themselves in a simple 8-bit minigame controlling Freddy Fazbear as he delivered pizzas to hungry children across the screen. The cheerful music played, the children waited with outstretched arms, and everything seemed wholesome in that deliberately retro way. Then, without warning, the game glitched. The screen distorted, Freddy's movements became erratic, and suddenly a grotesque version of Freddy appeared, accompanied by a jump scare that shattered the innocent facade completely. The tycoon game wasn't real, or rather, it was real, but it was only the surface layer of something much deeper and darker. The screen transitioned to a dimly lit room where a damaged animatronic sat in shadow. This was Scrap Baby, and she was very real, very dangerous, and very much part of the actual game that Scott had hidden behind the tycoon disguise. The cassette man's voice, later revealed to be Henry Emily himself, began providing instructions for a salvage procedure. Players weren't managing a cheerful restaurant. They were being lured into something far more sinister, just as the animatronics themselves were being lured. Scott Cawthon hadn't cancelled the 6th game at all. He had hidden it in plain sight, and the deception was perfect. The community's disappointment transformed instantly into excitement and appreciation for the elaborate ruse. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator was the 6th game, and it would prove to be one of the most important entries in the entire franchise. The deceptive beginning and Scrap Baby's introduction. After that initial jump scare pulls back the curtain on the game's true nature, players find themselves facing the first major component of Pizzeria Simulator's unique structure. The room is dark, lit only by a hanging lamp that casts harsh shadows across a salvage area. Across a simple table sits Scrap Baby, and even in her damaged state, she radiates a presence that feels distinctly different from the circus baby players encountered in sister location. This is Elizabeth Afton after years of deterioration, after being forcibly ejected from the Enard Collective, after rebuilding herself from whatever scrap she could find in the aftermath of that underground separation. Her design reflects this violent history. The cheerful clown aesthetic of the original circus baby has given way to something more desperately assembled. Her face, still recognizable with those distinctive green eyes that confirmed Elizabeth's possession back in sister location, now sits amid exposed endoskeleton and damaged casing. Her right hand has been replaced entirely with a massive claw, a modification that speaks to both her resourcefulness and her continued dangerousness. Most strikingly, she wears roller skates, an odd detail that somehow makes her more unsettling rather than less, as if she's cobbled together an identity from whatever pieces she could salvage from abandoned locations. The orange and red color scheme remains, but faded, worn by time and trauma. The cassette man's voice explains the situation with professional detachment. You have found a vintage animatronic in the back alley of your establishment. Company policy, detailed in paragraph 4 of your contract, allows for the salvaging of such finds for spare parts and materials. You will conduct an audio test to assess the animatronic's reactions, filling out a checklist as you proceed. You have been provided with a controlled shock device to defend yourself if the animatronic becomes hostile. The procedure is straightforward. The implications are anything but, as players lower their gaze to the clipboard to mark yes, no, or unsure for each audio prompt. Scrap Baby moves. Not continuously, but in those terrifying moments when you're looking down at your task. She inches closer across the table, her movements silent except for the faint mechanical sounds that signal her advancement. She proceeds through 3 stages of aggression. In the first, neutral stage, she remains relatively still, her posture non-threatening. In the second, agitated stage, she leans forward, her body language becoming more predatory. In the third, hostile stage, she prepares to lunge, and if you don't deploy the controlled shock at this moment, her jump scare fills the screen with those green eyes and gaping jaw, ending your salvage attempt in failure. But here's the crucial detail that defines much of Pizzeria Simulator's design philosophy. Even if you fail the salvage, even if Scrap Baby jump scares you and the procedure ends unsuccessfully, she still enters your pizzeria. The salvage isn't about keeping her out. It's about whether you receive the salvage bonus money for completing the procedure successfully. The trap has already been set the moment she appeared in that alley. Your choice is only whether you profit from her inevitable presence or not. This mechanic applies to all 4 salvageable animatronics and establishes a through line that becomes devastatingly clear by the game's end. Everyone is being gathered together, willing or not, for a purpose that transcends their individual choices. When Scrap Baby speaks during this initial encounter, her voice carries a sinister edge that wasn't present in the original baby's calculated sweetness. Elizabeth has changed during her time outside the underground facility, her personality corrupted further by years of existing as this damaged hybrid of child and machine. She talks about gathering, about completion, about making her daddy proud. These aren't idle threats or confused ramblings. She has a plan, or believes she does, and the player's appearance represents an opportunity she intends to exploit. What she doesn't yet understand is that she's as much a puppet in someone else's design as she ever was in her father's schemes. After this jarring introduction to the game's true nature, the screen finally transitions to what appears to be the tycoon gameplay promised in those initial screens. But now players understand that the management sim isn't a separate game, but rather one phase of a larger, more complex structure. The cheerful music that plays during the tycoon section feels almost mocking after that encounter with Scrap Baby, a reminder that horror often wears the mask of innocence in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. The game has revealed its hand, but only partially. There are more layers waiting to be discovered, more animatronics waiting in that alley, and a purpose binding it all together that won't become clear until the very end. The tycoon phase. Building your pizzeria, the tycoon section of Pizzeria Simulator, represents one of the most unique gameplay elements in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's series. Here, in stark contrast to the survival horror that defines most of the franchise, players actually build and customize their own Freddy Fazbear's pizza location, purchasing items from catalogs, arranging floor plans, and managing the business aspects that the series had only ever hinted at in phone calls and minigames. This phase occurs during the day, between the night shifts where survival becomes paramount, and it serves multiple purposes within the game's larger structure. The catalog system presents items divided into several categories, each representing different aspects of your pizzeria's operations. The initial catalog available to players is called Dumpster Diver Weekly, a name that perfectly captures both the franchise's dark humor and the actual quality of items available at this starting tier. These are budget options, the kind of things a struggling restaurant franchise might scrape together from whatever sources they can find. As you earn more money through successful nights and salvage operations, you unlock access to better catalogs with higher quality items that provide superior benefits to your establishment. Each item purchased affects 4 key statistics that determine your pizzeria's success. Atmosphere measures the ambience and appeal of your location, representing how welcoming and entertaining the space feels to customers. Safety indicates how secure parents perceive your establishment to be, an ironic metric given the franchise's history of child murders and animatronic malfunctions. Entertainment reflects the fun factor your pizzeria provides, the games, attractions, and animatronics that keep children engaged and happy. Finally, bonus revenue represents special items or features that directly increase your income beyond the baseline provided by the other 3 categories. But there's a 5th statistic lurking beneath these positive metrics, one that adds genuine tension to what might otherwise be a straightforward management game. Liability risk measures how likely your pizzeria is to face lawsuits from customers who experience accidents, injuries, or disturbing events during their visits. Many items, particularly the more interesting or entertaining ones, carry liability risk warnings. The discount ball pit, for example, offers good entertainment value at a low price, but comes with a liability rating of 1, meaning there's a chance something will go wrong with it. The more liability risk you accumulate, the more likely you are to face lawsuits that can drain your finances and force difficult choices about how to proceed. The lawsuits themselves represent some of the game's darkest comedy, presented through legal documents that describe increasingly absurd scenarios with deadpan seriousness. One lawsuit might detail how a child fell into a coma for 10 weeks, despite your restaurant only being open for 6 days, after witnessing an animatronic's head fall off. The staff tried to help, but their suggestion that the head stop talking apparently didn't resolve the situation. The lawsuit notes that the girl now requires medical assistance for all daily activities except watching television, hanging out with girlfriends, and going to the mall, suggesting a very selective form of trauma. Another might describe a child who broke their index finger and can no longer play Itsy Bitsy Spider, seeking damages for this devastating loss. These lawsuits are simultaneously hilarious and disturbing, maintaining the franchise's tradition of finding humor in horror, while never letting players forget the real tragedies underlying the premise. When lawsuits arrive, you face a choice: fight them in court or settle immediately. Fighting is cheaper in the short term, but takes time to resolve and might fail, resulting in larger penalties. Settling costs more upfront but resolves the issue immediately, allowing you to move forward without the hanging threat of legal consequences. These decisions add a strategic layer to the tycoon gameplay, forcing players to balance their desire for entertaining, profitable items against the potential financial drain of the liability those items create. Beyond the main catalog purchases, the tycoon phase includes opportunities to play test the various arcade machines and attractions you've added to your pizzeria. These minigames range from simple timing challenges to more elaborate concepts, and they serve both as engaging gameplay diversions and as vehicles for delivering lore. The Fruit Punch Clown and Lemonade Clown games task you with surprising children by timing your input correctly, resulting in either successful scares that earn points or mistimed attempts that leave the children unmoved. The Carnival Hoops game tests your basketball shooting timing, while other attractions offer variations on classic arcade concepts. Most significantly, 3 arcade machines contain hidden lore sequences that prove crucial to understanding the broader story. The Fruity Maze arcade machine, available from Stan's Budget Tech catalog for $150, presents a seemingly innocent maze game that transforms into something much darker across multiple playthroughs. The Midnight Motorist arcade, priced at $170 from the same catalog, starts as a simple racing game, but conceals one of the franchise's most debated and mysterious lore sequences. The security puppet item, available from the Rare Finds auction section, doesn't function as a traditional arcade machine, but instead presents a crucial minigame showing the very first tragedy of the entire series. We'll examine each of these in detail later, as they deserve their own space to unpack the layers of story and implication they contain. The tycoon phase also introduces sponsorship opportunities that can significantly boost your income. Accepting a sponsorship provides immediate funds, but comes with a consequence during the night shift. Advertisements will randomly pop up on your computer screen, making loud noises that attract animatronics and obstruct your view of critical systems. It's another risk-reward calculation, and the decision of whether to accept these offers depends on how confident you feel about surviving with the added difficulty they impose. As your pizzeria grows, you can expand its physical size through upgrades that cost $1,250 for full expansion. These upgrades allow you to place more items, creating a more elaborate and profitable establishment. The blueprint mode lets you arrange everything exactly as you want it, creating a layout that reflects your vision of what a Freddy Fazbear's pizza should look like. There's something almost therapeutic about this phase. The careful arrangement of stages and decorations, the optimization of floor space, the balancing of metrics to create the perfect restaurant. It's a stark contrast to the chaos and danger waiting in the night shift. And that contrast is precisely the point. The game lures you into comfort with the tycoon mechanics, makes you invest time and thought into building something worthwhile, makes you care about your pizzeria's success. Then night falls, and the animatronics begin their hunt, and you remember that all of this, the building and planning and careful management, is part of a larger trap you don't yet fully comprehend. Your investment in the pizzeria parallels the animatronics' investment in gathering there, and both parties believe they're working toward their own goals, when in reality, someone else has orchestrated every piece into position for an ending that will spare no one. The salvage system, Molten Freddy and Scraptrap. After completing your first day of managing the pizzeria and surviving the first night shift, you return to that dim salvage room the next day to find someone new waiting. This time, it's Molten Freddy, and of all the animatronics you'll encounter in Pizzeria Simulator, he might be the most visually disturbing. Where Scrap Baby maintained at least some semblance of her original form, Molten Freddy is almost entirely reduced to constituent parts, a writhing mass of wires and cables, with a mask placed on top that barely suggests the animatronic he once was. This is what remains of Ennard after the events of Sister Location's completion. After using Michael Afton's body as a disguise to escape the underground facility, after that body rotted away and forced them to retreat to the sewers, the fun-time animatronics that comprised Ennard underwent a violent separation. Scrap Baby, or rather Elizabeth Afton controlling that body, was forcibly ejected from the collective. The dialogue hidden in the source code of Scott Cawthon's website revealed this falling out, showing Baby arguing with the others while Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Freddy refused to continue working with her. The exact nature of their disagreement remains unclear, but the result was definitive. Baby left, or was forced out, and rebuilt herself into the Scrap Baby we met in that first salvage. The others remained together, and with Funtime Freddy's voice taking primary control, they became Molten Freddy. The name itself is significant. The melting reference doesn't refer to their physical state, though they certainly look melted in their tangled, damaged condition. Rather, it connects to the revelation from the Insanity ending about Remnant, that mysterious substance created when metal infused with souls is heated to specific temperatures. The fun-time animatronics contain Remnant from the original Missing Children, souls that William Afton harvested and injected into these newer models in his experiments with immortality and possession. Molten Freddy carries these fragments within his chaotic form, making him not just a dangerous machine, but a vessel for multiple spirits, their identities blurred together in the mechanical amalgamation. During the salvage procedure, Molten Freddy proves even more aggressive than Scrap Baby. His movements are jerkier, more unpredictable, accompanied by clicking sounds and the sparking of damaged wires. He advances through his 3 stages of hostility with barely contained violence, and his jump scare, when it occurs, fills the screen with that mask and the snarling tangle of cables that make up his body. His audio prompts reveal distorted laughter and mechanical sounds that emphasize his fragmentary nature. The cassette man's instructions remain calm and procedural, but there's an underlying acknowledgement that this particular salvage is especially dangerous. Still, the instructions are the same. Test the animatronic, complete the checklist, use the control shock when necessary, and whether you succeed or fail, he enters your pizzeria to join Scrap Baby in the growing collection. On the 3rd day, the salvage room reveals its next occupant, and this one carries the weight of the entire franchise on his decayed shoulders. Scraptrap is William Afton, still trapped in the spring Bonnie suit that became his prison and torture device, back when the spirits of his victims cornered him in the sealed safe room of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This isn't the Springtrap we saw in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, though. That version, while horrifying in his rot and decay, maintained the structural integrity of the original suit. Scraptrap looks different, and the community has debated the reasons for this redesign extensively. Some theorize that William found a second spring Bonnie suit and transferred to it after the fire at Fazbear's Fright. The suit in FNAF 3 was burning and damaged, and perhaps he managed to locate a backup suit in another abandoned location, something that would explain the differences in his appearance. Others suggest this is simply a visual redesign by Scott Cawthon to make William look more distinctive and threatening for this final confrontation, with the in-universe explanation being that the original suit deteriorated further over time, forcing William to make modifications and repairs using whatever materials he could find. The canonical answer remains ambiguous, but what's clear is that this is definitely William Afton, still undead, still dangerous, still refusing to accept the death his actions earned him decades ago. Scraptrap's design emphasizes his skeletal nature more than Springtrap did. The corpse within the suit is more visible, bones jutting through torn fabric and damaged endoskeleton. His right forearm is completely exposed bone and mechanism, the suit material having rotted away entirely. His jaw looks more skull-like, the mummified remains of William's face visible through the deteriorated spring Bonnie mask. One ear is mostly gone, while the other hangs intact, giving him an asymmetrical appearance that emphasizes his piecemeal survival. Most notably, he has bone fragments visible on his chest, a detail that sparked countless debates about whether William had died again and reanimated, or if these are simply exposed parts of his original decayed form. During his salvage procedure, Scraptrap behaves with a calculated malevolence that sets him apart from the others. Where Molten Freddy is chaotic and Scrap Baby methodical, Scraptrap feels predatory in a distinctly human way. His movements during the audio test are deliberate, purposeful, and his third stage of hostility has him leaning forward with clear intent. The sound associated with his approach is a heartbeat, slow and ominous, reminding players that despite his undead state, despite the rot and decay, William Afton's consciousness remains intact within this mechanical corpse. He knows what he's doing. He understands the trap being set, or believes he does, and he's confident enough in his own cunning to walk into it anyway. The cassette man's instructions don't change for Scraptrap, maintaining that same professional detachment. But there's something different about the atmosphere when you're sitting across from the man responsible for every tragedy in the franchise. The killer who set all of this in motion with his murder of Charlotte Emily outside the original restaurant. The salvage bonus for successfully completing his audio test is $1,000, double what Molten Freddy offered, as if even the game's economy acknowledges his importance. And like the others, success or failure in the salvage doesn't change the outcome. Scraptrap enters your pizzeria, joining the growing assembly of damaged, dangerous animatronics that are gathering for reasons they don't fully comprehend. These three, Baby, Molten Freddy, and Scraptrap, represent the Afton family legacy in its most corrupted form. Elizabeth, still trying to please a father who never truly valued her, believing she's gathering souls to complete some grand design. The missing children's remnant, trapped in Molten Freddy's wires, still seeking revenge or release. And William himself, the architect of all this suffering, too prideful and too stubborn to accept that his story has an ending written by someone else's hand. They're all coming together, drawn by the promise of purpose or prey, unaware that the pizzeria they're entering was built specifically to contain them, that every choice leading them here was anticipated and planned by someone who understands their natures better than they understand themselves. The salvage system. Scrap, Baby and Lefty. The fourth and final salvage occurs on Thursday night, after 3 days of building your pizzeria and surviving the escalating threat of the animatronics already gathered there. But this final arrival is different from the previous 3 in ways that aren't immediately apparent. When you enter the salvage room on day 4, you might find yourself looking at a simple sign with a crude smiley face drawing and text reading, "There's no one here, I'm already inside." This happens if you've already purchased Lefty from the Rare Finds auction catalogue before reaching the salvage phase, or if one of the other animatronics managed to sneak into your pizzeria early through high liability risk and mark down items. The sign is simultaneously humorous and unsettling, implying that whichever animatronic should have appeared for salvage has instead taken the initiative to bypass the procedure entirely. They've already positioned themselves within your establishment, and the crude drawing almost feels like mockery, a playful acknowledgement that the usual process has been circumvented. If this happens with Lefty specifically, it creates an interesting wrinkle in the story, as Lefty's presence in your pizzeria before the salvage phase means the trap has been set even earlier than planned, that the most important piece has already moved into position. But assuming you haven't purchased Lefty or triggered an early infiltration, the salvage room on day 4 reveals the final animatronic, and at first glance, he appears to be a straightforward addition to the roster. Lefty is a black version of Freddy Fazbear with a red top hat and bow tie, his design simple and striking in its color inversion of the original Freddy. His name comes from his most distinctive feature. His left eye is bright yellow, while his right is completely black, creating an unsettling asymmetry that suggests something is wrong beneath the surface. And indeed, something is very wrong, or very right, depending on whose perspective you take. Lefty is not what he appears to be. Unlike the other three animatronics, who arrived at the pizzeria through their own motivations of revenge, family loyalty, or predatory instinct, Lefty was specifically created for this purpose. Inside that black bear shell is another animatronic, one that players of the series know well. The puppet, also called the marionette, the first animatronic to be possessed, and the one responsible for giving life to the original missing children back in 1985. The puppet contains the spirit of Charlotte Emily, Henry's daughter, who was murdered by William Afton outside the original Freddy Fazbear's pizza location during a rainy night when she was accidentally locked out and left vulnerable. Henry created Lefty specifically to capture and contain the puppet. The name itself is a play on words, both describing his yellow left eye and suggesting left E, as in he was left behind for someone to find. The blueprints visible in the game's files confirm this purpose, showing Lefty's internal mechanisms designed to lure, capture, and suppress the puppet, keeping Charlotte calm and contained until the moment comes to set her free. This means that when Lefty arrives for salvage, when you conduct the audio test and watch him advance through his stages of aggression, you're not dealing with a hostile entity driven by vengeance or programming glitches. You're dealing with Charlotte herself, Henry's daughter, who has been trapped in that puppet form for decades, who has spent all those years trying to protect children from suffering the fate she endured, who has inadvertently prolonged the cycle of possession and tragedy through her own protective instincts. During the salvage procedure, Lefty's behavior reflects this dual nature. He moves more slowly than the others, his aggression tempered by the puppet's nature underneath. The sound associated with his approach is a mechanical whirring. The internal mechanisms of both Lefty and the puppet, creating overlapping layers of noise. His jump scare, when it occurs, is less violent than Scraptrap or Molten Freddy, more sorrowful in its presentation, as if the entity inside is regretful about the necessity of defense, rather than eager for the kill. The salvage bonus for completing Lefty's audio test successfully is $5,000, massively more than any other animatronic. A figure so large that successfully salvaging him essentially funds major expansions and purchases. It's as if the game itself acknowledges his importance, though players at this stage likely don't understand why. The blueprints found in the game files reveal more about Lefty's construction. He's equipped with a lure system that attracts the puppet, a capture mechanism that prevents escape once she's inside, and a suppression system that keeps her dormant until activated. These aren't features designed for entertainment or safety in any conventional sense. They're specific tools created by someone who understands the puppet's nature intimately, who knows exactly how to appeal to her protective instincts and use those instincts to draw her into a trap she wouldn't otherwise enter. Henry built Lefty knowing that Charlotte would be drawn to help children, knowing that an animatronic designed to look like it needed saving or containing would appeal to her nature, and knowing that once she was inside, she would be unable to escape until he decided to release her. This makes Lefty's presence in the pizzeria the most tragic of all the salvages. Scrap Baby believes she's gathering souls for her father's purposes. Molten Freddy is driven by the confused fragments of the missing children's remnant seeking closure. Scraptrap thinks he's hunting prey and continuing his experiments. But Lefty is there because a father trapped his own daughter, used her protective nature against her, contained her in darkness and machinery, because that was the only way to ensure she would be present for the ending he had planned. Henry doesn't want to trap Charlotte forever. He wants to free her, to release her from the prison the puppet has become. But to do that, he needs her in one place with all the others, and he's willing to use any method necessary, even this painful deception, to achieve that goal. When all 4 animatronics have been salvaged or have entered the pizzeria through other means, when Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy and Scraptrap and Lefty are all wandering the vents and hallways of your establishment, the trap is set, not for you, though you're certainly in danger every night you survive. The trap is for them, for these mechanical vessels carrying the souls and rage and regret of everyone William Afton hurt. Henry has gathered them all, using the promise of a new pizzeria, the appeal of prey and purpose, the lure of family reunion, and in Lefty's case, the literal lure built into the animatronic's chest cavity. They're all exactly where he needs them to be. Now he just needs someone to keep them occupied, to maintain the illusion that this is a real restaurant with real operations, to play the role of manager and night guard and salvage technician until the week is complete and the real purpose can finally be revealed. That someone, the player character managing this pizzeria and surviving each night, has their own identity revealed through context and implication. The cassette man's final speech addresses them directly, calling them a brave volunteer who somehow found this job listing, acknowledging that there was an exit plan for them, but suspecting they won't take it. The community has largely accepted that the player character is Michael Afton, William's son, who survived having his internal organs scooped out back in sister location due to the remnant in the scooper that brought him back as an undead entity. Michael has been searching for his father, trying to undo the damage William caused, and this job listing would have appeared to him as another opportunity to find answers or confront his family's legacy. He probably didn't realize he was walking into the final trap, the last act of this decades-long tragedy. But by the end of the week, by the time Henry's plan comes to fruition, Michael will understand, and he'll make a choice that defines him as separate from his father's evil once and for all. The night shift, defending against the salvaged. Once the day's management phase concludes, once you've purchased items and arranged your pizzeria and made decisions about lawsuits and sponsorships, night falls, and the game transforms into something much closer to traditional Five Nights at Freddy's gameplay, though with significant modifications that reflect the unique circumstances of this situation. You're not sitting in a security office monitoring camera feeds and closing doors against animatronics who mindlessly follow their programming. You're in what appears to be a cramped, cluttered workspace surrounded by computer equipment, papers, and the accumulated detritus of running a restaurant, and the animatronics hunting you through the vents and hallways above and around you are neither mindless nor simply following programming. The office interface is notably different from previous games in the series. Your computer monitor dominates the center of the screen, and this is where you'll perform the various tasks required each night. These tasks vary, but generally involve completing simple maintenance and management duties. You might need to drag files into folders, complete paperwork, process orders, or perform other mundane activities that would normally define a night manager's responsibilities. The cruel irony is that you need to actually accomplish these tasks to end each night. You can't simply survive until 6 a.m. by defending against animatronics and managing your resources. You have to actively work, exposing yourself to danger by looking down at tasks. while hostile entities prowl closer and closer. You have 3 primary defensive tools available, though calling them defensive might be generous. These are distraction and detection tools, ways to manage the animatronics' positions and buy yourself time to complete another task or 2 before the next threat arrives. The motion sensor, accessed through a button on the left side of your screen, brings up a simple map showing the vent system surrounding your office. Blips appear on this map when animatronics are moving through specific sections, giving you a general sense of where threats are positioned. Unlike the detailed camera systems of previous games, the motion sensor doesn't show you the animatronics directly. You see only dots on a map, abstract representations of danger moving through corridors you can't see. The audio lure, accessed through another button, allows you to play a sound in a specific location within the vent system. This sound attracts animatronics, drawing them away from your office and toward the source of the noise. In theory, this gives you time to work without immediate threat, as the animatronics investigate the sound before continuing their hunt. In practice, the audio lure's effectiveness varies by animatronic and situation. Some are more susceptible to distraction than others, and using the lure requires you to stop working on your tasks to access the motion sensor, identify where animatronics are positioned, and place the audio lure strategically. Every moment spent on defense is a moment not spent completing the work that will end the night, creating constant tension between safety and progress. The silent ventilation represents perhaps the most important defensive tool, despite being the simplest in concept. Your office has a fan that runs automatically to keep the space cool, but the fan is loud enough that it can mask the subtle audio cues indicating an animatronics approach. The silent ventilation system, when activated, mutes this fan noise and allows you to hear more clearly. This might seem like a minor benefit until you realize that most of your warning about impending danger comes from sound. Each animatronic produces distinct audio signals as they move through the vents, and being able to hear these sounds early gives you precious seconds to prepare, to check the motion sensor, to deploy an audio lure, or simply to stop working and focus entirely on defense until the immediate threat passes. The sounds themselves become crucial identifiers as you learn each animatronic's audio signature. Molten Freddy produces clicking sounds and wire sparking, the mechanical chaos of his tangled form announcing his approach with electric pops and snaps. Scraptrap's presence is heralded by a slow heartbeat, that methodical thump-thump that reminds you William Afton is still conscious within that rotting shell, still driven by something approximating a human pulse despite his undead state. Scrap Baby creates metallic rattling sounds, her movements accompanied by the scrape and clang of her damaged components, particularly that replacement claw dragging through the vent system. Lefty generates a whirring sound, the internal mechanisms of both his shell and the puppet inside creating overlapping layers of mechanical noise that sound almost mournful. As the week progresses and more animatronics enter your pizzeria through salvage or other means, the difficulty escalates dramatically. On Monday night, only Molten Freddy is present, having been the first salvage. His threat is manageable with practice, allowing you to focus on learning the basic mechanics of the tasks and defensive tools. Tuesday adds Scraptrap, and now you're managing 2 distinct threats with different movement patterns and audio signatures. Wednesday brings Scrap Baby into the mix, and 3 animatronics transform the night shift into a constant juggling act of checking motion sensors, deploying audio lures, and trying to snatch moments of work between defensive actions. Thursday, when Lefty joins the group, completes the set, and creates what many players consider the most challenging night in the game before Saturday's finale. The tasks themselves never get easier, and this is where Pizzeria Simulator distinguishes itself from many other Five Nights at Freddy's games. In previous entries, once you mastered the pattern of animatronic movements and the timing of your defensive actions, you could survive consistently even on the hardest difficulties. But in Pizzeria Simulator, you can't simply survive. You must complete your assigned work, and that work requires you to stop defending, to look away from the motion sensor, to ignore the sounds in the vents, because you need to drag this file to that folder or process this order or complete this paperwork. The animatronics don't wait politely while you work. They continue advancing, and every second you spend on tasks is a second they're getting closer. If you accepted sponsorships during the day to boost your income, the night shift becomes even more chaotic. Advertisements pop up on your screen randomly, loud and obnoxious, announcing products or services that have paid for your attention. These ads obstruct your view of important elements, making it harder to see tasks or access defensive tools quickly. More dangerously, the loud sounds associated with these advertisements attract animatronics, essentially summoning threats to your position at random intervals. You can't predict when an ad will appear, can't prepare for the sudden audio spike that will bring multiple animatronics toward your office simultaneously. It's a perfect example of how the business decisions you made during the day create consequences in the night, how the desire for more money to expand your pizzeria and buy better items translates directly into increased danger during the survival phase. The jump scares in Pizzeria Simulator maintain the franchise's tradition of being genuinely startling, while adding slight variations based on which animatronic catches you. When Molten Freddy strikes, the screen fills with his mask and those writhing wires, the chaotic tangle of his form completely obscuring your vision before the game over screen appears. Scraptrap's jump scare emphasizes his skeletal nature, those exposed bones and mummified remains lunging forward with predatory intent, William Afton claiming another victim even in his deteriorated state. Scrap Baby's jump scare focuses on her face and that massive claw, Elizabeth's corrupted innocence transformed into mechanical violence. Lefty's jump scare notably feels different from the others, less aggressive, almost reluctant, as if Charlotte herself regrets the necessity of this defensive action, but can't prevent the programming from executing once you've failed to defend yourself properly. Each night survived rewards you with money based on your performance, the completion of tasks, and various bonuses. This money funds your next day's purchases, allowing you to improve your pizzeria, expand your space, buy better items that increase your ratings and profitability. The cycle continues. Manage during the day, survive through the night, earn money, spend money, repeat. But as Friday transitions into Saturday, as the week approaches its conclusion, the nature of what you're participating in begins to shift. The cassette man's instructions take on new significance. The gathering of these animatronics in one place starts to feel less accidental and more orchestrated. And by the time Saturday night arrives, by the time you've survived 5 nights of escalating threat while building a fully operational pizzeria, the trap is ready to spring, and everyone involved, animatronics and player alike, is about to discover what this was all really about from the very beginning. The Law minigame, Fruity Maze. Among the various arcade machines available for purchase during the Tycoon phase, 3 stand apart from the simple timing challenges and score-based games that comprise most of the entertainment offerings. These 3 contain hidden lore sequences that, when discovered across multiple playthroughs, reveal crucial information about events that occurred years before Pizzeria Simulator's main story. They're not required to reach any particular ending, not necessary for completion certificates beyond the specific Lawkeeper achievement that acknowledges finding all three. But their contents provide essential context for understanding how the tragedies began, how victims were chosen, and how the mechanisms of possession and protection came into existence. The Fruity Maze arcade machine, purchased from Stan's Budget Tech catalog for $150, presents itself initially as a straightforward retro-style game. When you activate it for the first time through playtesting, you control a young girl navigating a maze filled with fruit. The objective is simple: collect all the fruit before time runs out. You're aided by power-ups scattered throughout the maze. The magnet attracts fruit automatically. The lightning bolt increases your movement speed, and a purple blob allows you to pass through walls, making navigation faster and collection easier. The game has a cheerful, bouncy soundtrack typical of arcade games from the 1980s, and the pixel art style evokes nostalgia for that era of gaming. When you collect enough fruit to extend the timer, the screen briefly flashes to show the girl's face, smiling like a reflection on a screen, along with text reading "Time Extended." This happens multiple times per playthrough, and initially, there's nothing unusual about it beyond the slight uncanniness of that reflection effect. When you successfully collect all the fruit, the game displays "Amazing" and ends, returning you to the Pizzeria interface. If you play it only once, Fruity Maze seems like exactly what it appears to be: a simple arcade game with no deeper significance, another entertainment option to boost your establishment's appeal. But if you return to Fruity Maze and play it a second time, changes become immediately apparent. The fruit are now different. What were oranges or apples before have been replaced by something dark and still on the ground. When you collect one, you realize it's a dog, lying motionless, and the girl's reaction to collecting these dead dogs is revealed in the time extension screen. Instead of smiling, she looks sad. Her expression one of confusion and grief. The game continues with these dead dogs replacing the fruit, and the bouncy music now feels inappropriate, almost mocking in its cheerfulness against the grimness of what you're collecting. When you complete the second playthrough, collecting all the dead dogs, the game ends. But something has shifted. The tone has transformed from innocent to disturbing. The third playthrough is where Fruity Maze reveals its true purpose. The game starts again, but now the changes are even more dramatic. The music is distorted, slowed down, playing at wrong pitches and speeds, like a cassette tape degrading. The dead dogs are now lying in puddles of blood, the pixel art making the gore unmistakable despite the simple graphics. The lightning bolt power-up, which previously increased your speed, is now glitching, flickering between sprites as if the game itself is corrupted. The wall-passing power-up has vanished entirely, and navigation becomes more difficult without it. The girl's face during time extensions is no longer just sad. She's crying now, tears visible on her pixelated face, and standing behind her, barely visible but unmistakably present, is a figure in a Spring Bonnie costume. The rabbit suit from Fredbear's Family Diner, the yellow suit that William Afton used to lure children to their deaths. The implication is immediate and horrifying. This is happening at the same time the girl is collecting these dead dogs. Someone in a rabbit costume is behind her, and that someone has done something to her beloved pet. On this third playthrough, the goal changes. You're not trying to collect all the fruit or dogs anymore. The game is designed to be unwinnable at this point, forcing you toward failure. When time runs out, when you inevitably lose, the screen doesn't return to the pizzeria. Instead, it transitions to a full screen, showing the girl crying, with Spring Bonnie now clearly visible behind her. Text appears in 3 distinct colors and phrases. First, in blue text, "He is not dead." Then in yellow text, "He is over here." Finally, in blue again, "Follow me." This is William Afton's voice, speaking through the Spring Bonnie costume, using the girl's love for her dog to lure her away from safety. He's telling her the dog isn't dead, that he's found it, that she should follow him to where the dog is waiting. It's a lie, obviously, a manipulation of her grief and hope, and it's working. The girl is following him, leaving the safety of the arcade, going wherever this friendly rabbit man leads her, and we know, from everything we understand about the missing children incident, exactly where that leads. To a back room, to violence, to possession, to spending decades trapped inside an animatronic body, confused and angry and seeking revenge against adults who look like the man who killed her. The community has widely accepted that this girl is Susie, one of the 5 original missing children whose murders set the entire franchise's tragic events into motion. Phone Guy, in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, mentions the missing children incident, talking about how the animatronics started acting strangely, how suspicion fell on someone wearing a mascot costume. One of the children who vanished during that incident was named Susie, and the Fruity Maze minigame shows exactly how William Afton lured her to her death. He didn't use force. He used psychological manipulation, identifying something the child cared about deeply, her dog, and exploiting that emotional vulnerability to isolate her from witnesses and safety. The dead dog represents a separate tragedy, possibly something William orchestrated specifically to create this opportunity, or possibly an accident he learned about and decided to exploit. Either way, Susie's loss and grief made her vulnerable, and William recognized that vulnerability and used it. The minigame places this event at Fredbear's family diner, during the era when the Spring Bonnie suits were still in active use for performances. This timing is crucial, as it establishes that William's murders began during the height of Fazbear Entertainment's early success, that he was killing children while simultaneously running restaurants meant to bring them joy. Susie's soul went on to possess Chica, the chicken animatronic, which explains some of the behaviors and Easter eggs associated with that character throughout the series. Chica's obsession with food, her association with party elements and children's celebrations, even her cupcake companion, all take on new significance when you understand that the child possessing her loved her pet so much that mentioning its supposed survival was enough to lure her to her death. The Fruity Maze minigame transforms Chica from a generic animatronic into a memorial for a specific child with specific grief, murdered by a man who understood exactly which emotional wounds to probe to achieve his goals. The game's degradation across the 3 playthroughs mirrors Susie's experience. The first playthrough represents her normal day, playing games, having fun, enjoying the arcade. The second shows the intrusion of tragedy, the loss of her dog contaminating what should have been innocent entertainment. The third shows the full horror of manipulation and impending doom, the corruption of everything good in her life, leading inevitably to that final lure that will end her life and trap her in mechanical imprisonment for decades. It's one of the most effectively disturbing minigames in the entire franchise, precisely because it doesn't show the violence directly. It shows the setup, the psychological exploitation that made the violence possible. And somehow, that's more unsettling than any jump scare. The lore minigame, Midnight Motorist. If Fruity Maze represents tragedy that the community has largely reached consensus about, Midnight Motorist represents the opposite. An enigma that has spawned countless theories, fierce debates, and no definitive answers even years after its discovery. The Midnight Motorist arcade machine, available from Stan's budget tech catalog for $170, starts as a simple racing game with surprisingly catchy music. You control a pink car driving down a road, avoiding other purple cars that serve as obstacles. The longer you go without hitting another car, the faster you move, building speed and points. Hit a car, and you lose that speed, forcing you to build it back up gradually. It's a straightforward, endless runner concept. And like Fruity Maze on its first playthrough, there's nothing immediately unusual about it. But unlike Fruity Maze, Midnight Motorist doesn't require multiple playthroughs to reveal its secret. Instead, on your first playthrough, typically during the fourth lap if you've been driving normally, a gap appears in the bottom border of the screen. It's easy to miss if you're focused on avoiding obstacles, but if you notice it and drive through it, the game transforms completely. The racing section ends, and you're suddenly transported to a new area with entirely different music, darker and more ominous. The screen shows a winding road through a rainy forest, rendered in the same simple pixel art style, but conveying a very different atmosphere. You now control a car from a top-down perspective, driving along this forest road. The rain is visible falling, creating atmosphere despite the simple graphics. Eventually, the road splits, giving you a choice. Go west or continue south. If you choose west, you arrive at a location marked by a neon sign reading JR's, with what appears to be a parking lot containing several cars, including a green one that stands out among the others. Your car stops, and a yellow figure, later nicknamed Orange Guy or Mustard Man by the community, steps out. This is the player character, and he approaches JR's entrance. A green figure stands outside, blocking the door. When Orange Guy tries to enter, the green figure speaks. "Come on, you know you can't be here. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." The dialogue implies Orange Guy is banned from this establishment, or at least not welcome there. The green figure refuses to let him pass, and there's nothing more to do at this location. Orange Guy returns to his car, and you drive back to the fork in the road. Going south this time, you continue driving through the rain until you reach a small house isolated in the forest. Orange Guy exits the car and enters the house, where the real mystery of Midnight Motorist unfolds. Inside, you find a sitting figure, grey and hunched, watching television. When Orange Guy approaches, text appears. "Leave him alone tonight. He had a rough day." The speaker is defending someone who presumably had difficulty today, suggesting Orange Guy should show restraint or understanding. Orange Guy's response is harsh. "I'll make him a deal. He can go to his room and I'll come back in a little bit." You can control Orange Guy to move around the house. There's a room on the left that Orange Guy won't enter, with text appearing when you try. "This is my private room. Stay out of my room." The possessive nature and aggressive tone suggest this room belongs to someone else in the house, someone with authority to keep Orange Guy out despite him being an adult who apparently owns or controls this house. To the right, there's another room, smaller, presumably belonging to the person mentioned in the earlier dialogue. When Orange Guy enters this room, he finds it empty, with a window shattered outward. Going outside to the back of the house, Orange Guy finds footprints leading into the forest toward a mound of disturbed earth that some interpret as a grave or buried animatronic. Text appears, "Ran off to that place again. He'll be sorry when he gets back." This confirms that whoever was supposed to be in that room has escaped, fled into the rain to somewhere they frequently visit, somewhere Orange Guy disapproves of. The game ends here, returning you to the pizzeria, and leaves you with nothing but questions. The community has debated every element of this minigame with an intensity usually reserved for the franchise's most fundamental mysteries. The identity of Orange Guy alone has spawned multiple competing theories. One prominent interpretation suggests Orange Guy is William Afton, the purple car matching the purple color often associated with him in previous minigames, and the timing of the rainy night paralleling the security puppet minigame that shows Charlotte Emily's murder. If this is William immediately after killing Charlotte, then the person in the room who escaped could be the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4, William's younger son, running away to Fredbear's family diner, where he frequently observes the animatronics despite his fear of them. This theory, often called Afton MM, positions the TV watcher as Michael Afton, William's older son, who had a rough day possibly because he did something terrible, like locking his brother in a room or tormenting him with masks, and is now being told to leave his brother alone. The private room Orange Guy can't enter would be William's experiment room, the place where he conducts his research into death and possession. The disturbed mound in the forest could be a buried animatronic, possibly one of the twisted animatronics from the novel trilogy, or simply a hole where something was recently dug up. But there's an equally prominent alternative theory that suggests Orange Guy is Henry Emily, not William Afton. This interpretation, sometimes called Henry MM, argues that the rainy night is significant because it's the same night Charlotte died, and Henry is arriving home after his daughter's murder, finding his family in crisis. The person who ran away could be Henry's wife or another child, seeking comfort or escape. The private room could belong to Henry's wife, explaining why he can't enter despite being in his own house. This theory often connects to expanded universe lore from the novels, though with caution about mixing book and game canon. Yet another interpretation suggests the runaway child is Michael Afton, that Michael is the one who frequently escapes to the diner or wherever that place represents, and that Orange Guy is someone else entirely, possibly a third character we haven't fully identified. The green figure at JR's has been theorized to be anyone from an employee to another family member to a supernatural entity, with the green color potentially being significant or simply an artistic choice. The Ultimate Guidebook from the franchise refers to JR's as a restaurant rather than a bar, though some fans question this designation based on the context of someone being banned or unwelcome there. What makes Midnight Motorist so frustrating and fascinating is that, unlike most FNAF lore, which eventually yields to community analysis and pattern recognition, this minigame has stubbornly refused to be solved with any consensus. Every interpretation has evidence supporting it and contradictions challenging it. The game files label the second section, the part after the racing game, as Later That Night, which provides some timing context, but doesn't clarify whose night or what significance that timing has. The parallels to Security Puppet's reign suggest a connection, but whether that connection is immediate causation or thematic resonance remains debated. Some theorists have even questioned whether Midnight Motorist is meant to have a single correct interpretation, suggesting instead that Scott Cawthon intentionally created an ambiguous scenario that could apply to multiple situations or characters, allowing players to find whichever meaning resonates with their understanding of the larger story. Others maintain that there must be a specific answer, that the minigame was included for a reason, and that reason is to show a specific moment in the timeline that clarifies something important about character relationships and motivations. What's clear is that someone is angry, someone else had a rough day, someone ran away to a place they frequent despite disapproval, and all of this is happening on a rainy night that feels significant. Orange Guy is associated with a purple car, connecting him to William Afton through visual language, but his behavior and dialogue could fit multiple characters in the various circumstances. The house represents a family in dysfunction, secrets kept behind locked doors, a child seeking escape from whatever trauma or fear or compulsion drives them back to that place in the forest, again and again, despite knowing they'll be sorry when they return. Midnight Motorist remains, years after Pizzeria Simulator's release, one of the franchise's greatest unsolved mysteries, often called FNAF's biggest mystery by the community. It's a testament to the game's complexity, that even with all the other lore revealed in this entry, even with Henry's final speech providing closure to so many plot threads, this one minigame continues to generate discussion, theories, and frustrated fascination in equal measure. The lore minigame, Security Puppet. The third and final lore-containing minigame isn't hidden in an arcade machine, but rather comes packaged with the Security Puppet item itself, available from the Rare Finds auction section of the catalogue. Unlike Fruity Maze and Midnight Motorist, which require specific actions to trigger their lore sequences, Security Puppet's minigame begins immediately upon playtesting, and its purpose is explicit from the start. This is the origin story of the puppet, the first possessed animatronic in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and the minigame shows exactly how that possession came to be. The minigame's visual style is similar to previous FNAF minigames, using simple pixel art and limited colors to convey the scene. You control the security puppet, that distinctive marionette figure with its striped limbs and white mask-like face, and you're positioned inside a Freddy Fazbear's pizza location during what appears to be a busy day or evening. The perspective is from inside a music box, a physical constraint that becomes central to the tragedy about to unfold. The objective isn't combat or collection. You're simply trying to keep children happy and safe, approaching them to satisfy their needs before they become too distressed. The children are color-coded with bracelets that match different shades, representing the party tracking system that allows the puppet to monitor and respond to specific children who need attention. Green, red, blue, yellow. Each color represents a child under your watch, but there's an instruction at the start that proves crucial. There is no child with green. This statement establishes that while you can see children with various colored bracelets, there's specifically no child wearing green who you need to attend to inside the restaurant. That information seems odd, almost like a glitch in the programming, until you understand what it's really telling you. As you move through the establishment, keeping children entertained and preventing their distress meters from filling, you notice the security system at work. The puppet is sophisticated for its time, able to track multiple children simultaneously, respond to their emotional states, and intervene before situations escalate to actual problems. It's the perfect guardian, attentive and tireless. exactly the kind of system a worried father might create to protect his daughter in an environment where supervision is difficult due to crowds and multiple rooms. Then the minigame shifts perspective, showing the exterior of the building. Outside, in the rain, a small figure stands alone, locked out. This child wears a green bracelet. The puppet, still inside the music box, senses this immediately. The programming or the consciousness within recognizes that the child with the green bracelet, the one child who isn't supposed to exist inside the restaurant because she's meant to be the one who never needs help, is outside, alone, and in distress. The music box opens and the puppet emerges, leaving the safety of the building to reach the child. But the puppet is an animatronic, a machine with electrical components, and it's raining heavily outside. As the puppet crawls across the wet ground toward the child, you can see it struggling, its movements becoming more labored with each inch forward. The rain is shorting out its systems, causing malfunctions, and yet it keeps moving, driven by its programming or something deeper, trying desperately to reach the girl before it's too late. The child is motionless now, collapsed against the building or the ground, and other children inside the restaurant are visible through windows, their faces pressed against the glass, watching this tragedy unfold, but unable or unwilling to help. The puppet reaches the child just as its systems completely fail. It collapses beside her, circuits sparking out in the rain, and the screen fades to show both figures lying motionless in the alley. This is Charlotte Emily's death, the first murder that William Afton committed, the killing that started everything else. She was Henry Emily's daughter, and Henry had created the security puppet specifically to protect her, linking it to a green bracelet, so it would always know where she was and respond if she needed help. But on this night, the other children locked her out. Whether accidentally or through some childish cruelty, and while she stood there in the rain, vulnerable and alone, William Afton found her. The minigame doesn't show the actual murder. It doesn't need to. The child's motionless state and the puppet's desperate attempt to reach her tell the story clearly enough. What the minigame emphasizes instead is the possession itself, the moment when Charlotte's spirit transferred into the animatronic that tried to save her. The puppet lying beside her body in the rain. Its systems failed, but something else awakening inside it. Consciousness returning, but in a different form. No longer Charlotte Emily, the little girl, but Charlotte Emily the puppet, the first child to possess an animatronic, and the one who would go on to give life to the others. This origin is crucial to understanding the puppet's behavior throughout the series. In Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the puppet serves as both a threat to the night guard and a giver of gifts to other animatronics in hidden minigames. The gifts are animatronic heads, and the implication is that the puppet is helping the other murdered children possess these mechanical bodies, transferring their spirits from their corpses into the machines that will serve as their prisons and vessels for revenge. The puppet doesn't attack out of malice or programming errors. It attacks because Charlotte's protective instincts remain, warped by death and possession, but still fundamentally driven by that original purpose. Keep children safe, even if it means seeing adults as threats. Henry's voice, during the completion ending, addresses Charlotte directly, speaking to his daughter trapped inside the puppet, acknowledging that he knew she would return to these places, that it's in her nature to protect the innocent. He apologizes for the day she was shut out and left to die, for not being there to lift her up the way she lifted others. It's one of the most emotionally devastating moments in the entire franchise. a father speaking to his murdered child, acknowledging his failure to protect her, while also recognizing the strength and compassion that defined her even in death. The security puppet minigame connects directly to Lefty's presence in Pizzeria Simulator. Henry created Lefty to capture and contain the puppet because he needed Charlotte present for the final ending, but also because he needed to save her, to release her from the burden she'd carried for so many years. The puppet had been protecting children, preventing them from finding peace, keeping them bound to their animatronic bodies because she didn't know how else to help them. Henry's plan includes Charlotte, not as an afterthought, but as one of the primary purposes. He's gathering everyone, William and the children William killed, and Elizabeth, who died in William's machine, and Charlotte, who died trying to protect others from William's evil, and he's going to end it all at once, giving everyone the release they've been denied for decades. The minigame is relatively simple in its gameplay, lasting only a few minutes, but its emotional impact and lore significance are enormous. It's the beginning of everything. The first possession, the first failure of the systems, meant to protect children. The first time a father's creation became both a tomb and a second chance for his child spirit. Every other minigame, every other revelation, every other tragedy in the series can be traced back to this moment in the rain, when Charlotte Emily died outside a pizzeria and the security puppet collapsed beside her, their fates becoming intertwined forever. Candy Cadet's Dark Tales. Among the various attractions and items available for purchase to populate your pizzeria, one stands out for its uncanny nature and cryptic storytelling. Candy Cadet is a vendor bot that dispenses candy to children, but unlike the other arcade machines and entertainment options that serve purely practical purposes in boosting your establishment's ratings, Candy Cadet has another function: telling stories. These aren't the cheerful tales you might expect from a children's entertainer. They're dark parables about sacrifice, loss, and the futility of certain choices, and their connection to the larger lore of Pizzeria Simulator and the franchise as a whole has been the subject of extensive community analysis. Candy Cadet himself is a bluish-grey robot with a distinctive design that sets him apart from the animatronics. He has two yellow beaded antennae, one topped with an orange orb, and the other with a pinkish-red orb, giving him an almost alien appearance. His body is covered with constantly changing multicolored lights that cycle through different patterns, creating a hypnotic effect. Long arms end in claw-like hands, and his base consists of two large wheels that allow him to move around. In his torso is a candy slide where dispensed sweets would emerge, and near the bottom are coin slots where customers would pay for their treats. When you purchase Candy Cadet for $310 from the Stan's Budget Tech catalog and place him in your pizzeria, you can interact with him through the playtest function. Activating him triggers a simple minigame where you press the button on his chest to receive candy. Most of the time, this results in the standard candy dispensing followed by loud air horns and a game win message that feels jarringly cheerful. But on rare occasions, determined by random chance that has frustrated many players, trying to hear all the stories, Candy Cadet will say something different. "Return to Candy Cadet again," he announces in his distinctively monotone, robotic voice with a vaguely southeastern British accent. "And maybe I will tell you a story." This is your indication that you're in the right sequence, that the next time you interact with him, there's a possibility he'll share one of his three tales. The randomness of this occurrence has been a point of contention in the community, as the stories are not required for the main completion ending, but are necessary for the Lawkeeper certificate. And some players have spent hours clicking on Candy Cadet, hoping to trigger the story sequence. When Candy Cadet does tell a story, the delivery is haunting despite, or perhaps because of, the mechanical monotone. There's no emotion in the voice, no variation in tone or pace, just a steady recitation of disturbing events as if describing something completely ordinary. The lack of affect makes the content somehow more unsettling, as if the machine doesn't understand the horror of what it's describing, just faithfully relaying information about tragedy without comprehension or sympathy. The first story involves 5 keys and a desperate woman. Now I will tell you a story about a young woman who was sealed in a small room. Candy Cadet begins. In the room was the furnace and 5 keys. She was told that each of the 5 keys would unlock one of 5 doors outside her room. Inside each room was a child that she could take with her as she fled the building. But she was only allowed to leave her own room with 1 key, not all 5. Desperate to find a way to save all 5 children, the woman melted the 5 keys together in the furnace to create a single key, hoping it would unlock all 5 doors. Of course, it did not work that way. Now her key opens none of the doors. Rather than leaving her room with a key to 1 life, she had taken with her the key to 5 deaths. The second story concerns a young boy and his pets. Now I will tell you a story about a little boy. He had a red snake that he kept in a metal cage, whose hunger could not be satisfied. One day, the boy found 5 baby kittens outside his house. He brought them inside and kept them in a shoebox. He knew that the snake might kill them, but could not bring himself to get rid of the snake. He knew that if he chose 1 kitten to feed to the snake, it might be satisfied, but he could not choose. So he went to bed, leaving the cage open. The snake went to the shoebox, chose a kitten at random, and ate it. After 5 nights had gone by, the boy was full of regret and cut the snake open. He pieced the remains together and put the kitten back into the shoebox. The third story tells of a kind man and orphans. Now I will tell you a story about a kind man who would visit 5 orphans and bring them toys and gladness. The man lived alone and lived in fear that someone might break into the house of one of the 5 children. So he adopted all 5 and brought them together in one place, in his own home. He promised them to never leave them, and they promised to always come home and never stay out too late. He left one day to buy food, his heart being filled with gladness, but returned to find that the burglar had chosen his home and had killed all 5 of the children. The man could only afford 1 coffin, so he stitched the 5 bodies together to make one and buried the child. That night, there was a knock at the door. All 3 stories share common themes: 5 victims, 1 perpetrator or dangerous element, attempts to save or combine the 5 that result in tragedy, and outcomes that feel almost like cosmic punishment for the attempts at salvation. The number 5 appears repeatedly and prominently in each tale, and anyone familiar with 5 Nights at Freddy's lore immediately recognizes the significance of that number. 5 children were murdered by William Afton in the Missing Children incident of 1985. 5 animatronics became possessed by their spirits. 5 souls have been trapped in mechanical bodies for decades. The community interpretation of these stories generally agrees on their broader meaning, while debating specific analogies. The updated edition of the Freddy Files, an official guidebook for the franchise, states that all of Candy Cadet's stories are about William Afton's experiments on the missing children and the creation of the amalgamation from the 4th Closet novel. though how directly the book lore applies to game lore remains a subject of discussion. The first story, with the 5 keys and the desperate woman, is often interpreted as representing Henry's attempt to save all the children at once by gathering them in one place, the pizzeria. Each child could have been saved individually, could have been set free in their own time, but Henry wanted to save them all together, to end all their suffering simultaneously. By melting the keys together, by gathering everyone in one location and initiating the fire, he's attempting a solution that requires all 5 to be present. The story's tragic ending, where the combined key opens no doors, suggests a warning about this plan, but it might also be descriptive rather than prescriptive, showing what happened when William Afton tried his own version of combining the 5 by harvesting their remnant and injecting it into other animatronics. The second story, with the boy and the snake and the kittens, often gets interpreted as Henry being the boy, William Afton being the insatiable red snake, and the 5 kittens being the murdered children. Henry knew William was dangerous, knew that partnering with him carried risks, but couldn't bring himself to end the partnership or stop William before tragedy occurred. Henry couldn't choose which child to sacrifice, couldn't make that impossible decision, so he effectively left the cage open by not acting against William. After 5 nights, representing either the 5 children's deaths or a period of realization and regret, Henry cut the snake open by investigating William's crimes and discovering the truth. The reassembly of the kitten by piecing remains together could represent Henry's attempt to restore the children by releasing them from possession, though they'll never be truly whole again. The third story, about the kind man and the 5 orphans, presents the most directly tragic narrative. The man's protective instincts lead him to gather the children together, making them easier targets when the burglar arrives. His inability to afford separate coffins results in combining the 5 bodies into one, creating something unnatural in a misguided attempt to give them proper burial. The knock at the door that night suggests the combined entity returning, unable to rest, perhaps seeking justice, or simply unable to move on because of how their deaths and bodies were handled. This story could represent either Henry's perspective, having lost control of the situation when William killed the children he was trying to protect, or William's perspective, having gathered victims and combined their spirits in ways that prevented them from finding peace. What makes Candy Cadet's stories so effective is their presentation. They're told in a public space, potentially in front of children, by a machine designed to dispense candy and create positive associations with the pizzeria. The juxtaposition of these dark parables about death and regret with the cheerful air horns and game win messages that follow creates cognitive dissonance that mirrors the entire franchise's aesthetic of horror hidden within family entertainment. Candy Cadet himself is a friendly-looking robot, colorful and engaging, and yet his stories are anything but friendly. He's telling customers, including children, about suffocation in locked rooms, pets being eaten alive, and orphans being murdered by burglars. The mechanical monotone delivery strips away any potential for these stories to be dismissed as jest or exaggeration. Candy Cadet isn't performing. He's reporting, relaying information about tragedies with the same effect he uses to announce candy dispensing. This suggests the stories aren't meant as entertainment, but as warnings, as documentation, as confession perhaps, programmed into this vendor bot by someone who needed these narratives preserved and shared, even if their full meaning wouldn't be understood until later. Whether Henry programmed these stories into Candy Cadet as a way of processing his own guilt and warning others, or whether they represent some other source of information about the events surrounding Pizzeria Simulator's conclusion. Their inclusion in the game adds yet another layer to the complex narrative Scott Cawthon constructed. They're optional content that most players might never hear, hidden behind random chance and requiring persistence to discover. And yet, they contain significant thematic resonance with the game's ending and Henry's final speech. The stories about combining 5 things into one, about failing to save everyone despite good intentions, about gathering victims together and inadvertently making them more vulnerable. All of these themes play out in Pizzeria Simulator's true conclusion. Henry gathers the animatronics in one place, attempts to save them all at once through fire and release, and risks creating a situation where if his plan fails, he simply made them easier targets for each other, or provided William Afton with more victims to experiment on. Candy Cadet's stories suggest awareness of these risks, acknowledgement that mass salvation attempts often backfire, and yet Henry proceeds anyway, because the alternative, doing nothing or trying to save them one at a time over decades, isn't acceptable to him. Henry's master plan. Throughout the week, you spend building your pizzeria and surviving the night shifts. The cassette man's voice provides instructions, guidance, and context for your actions. His tone is professional, almost clinical, as he explains how to handle the salvage procedures, what your responsibilities are as a manager, and how to use the various systems at your disposal during the night shifts. He speaks with the authority of someone who understands every aspect of the business you're running, every danger you're facing, and every purpose behind the seemingly mundane tasks you're performing. But it isn't until the completion ending, after you've survived all 6 nights and salvaged or otherwise acquired all 4 key animatronics, that his true identity and the full scope of his plan finally become clear. The cassette man is Henry Emily, co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, alongside William Afton, creator of the original animatronic characters, and father to Charlotte Emily, whose murder outside the original pizzeria catalyzed everything that followed. Henry has been absent from the physical franchise for decades, mentioned in phone calls as having disappeared, described as the original owner who vanished after tragedy struck his family. But he hasn't been inactive. He's been researching, learning, gathering information about what William did, how possession works, where remnant comes from, and most importantly, how to end the cycle of suffering that his partnership with William inadvertently created. The construction of Lefty represents one part of this research. Henry didn't just build a random animatronic and hope it would work. He created a machine specifically designed to capture and contain the puppet, complete with lure mechanisms that would appeal to Charlotte's protective nature and suppression systems that would keep her controlled until he was ready to release her. This requires deep understanding of how possessed animatronics function, what drives them, what attracts them, and how to safely interact with them without being killed or allowing them to escape. Henry spent years perfecting this design, and Lefty's successful capture of the puppet proves his research was effective. Similarly, Henry learned about remnant, that supernatural substance created when metal infused with souls is heated to maintain its properties, or destroyed to release those properties. The blueprints visible in the Insanity ending show detailed knowledge of remnant extraction, the scooper device William used to inject it, and the mechanisms by which it binds spirits to physical forms. Henry understood that simply destroying the animatronics wouldn't free the children. They'd already been destroyed once, broken down and rebuilt, and they remained trapped. To free them, he needed to destroy the remnant itself, to heat it beyond the threshold where it could maintain cohesion, to essentially burn away the supernatural binding that kept these spirits anchored to the physical world. The pizzeria itself was never intended to be a real restaurant. Its elaborate trap, a maze with no exit, designed to lure specific targets into specific positions where they can't escape when the true plan activates. The job listing that brought the player character, presumably Michael Afton, to this location was part of the trap, offering what seemed like an opportunity to run a legitimate business, but actually serving to keep someone present who could maintain the illusion of normal operations while Henry prepared the final act. The salvage procedures ensured the key animatronics entered the building and remained there, drawn by the promise of prey or the appeal of gathering together for their own purposes. The tycoon phase, all that building and decorating and management, served to keep the animatronics occupied and provided opportunities for them to hide within the pizzeria, making themselves comfortable in what they believed was their new hunting ground or gathering place. The night shifts kept them engaged, gave them a target to focus on, prevented them from questioning too deeply why this particular pizzeria seemed designed specifically for them. Every aspect of the week's activities served Henry's larger plan, and you, as the player, were executing that plan step by step, without understanding what you were really doing until the end. The catalogs themselves contain clues about Henry's involvement. Items are purchased from various suppliers, but the Rare Finds auction, where Lefty can be acquired for just $5, seems almost too convenient, too perfectly designed to ensure Lefty enters the pizzeria, whether through salvage or purchase. The security puppet item that triggers the Charlotte Emily minigame feels less like a random arcade attraction and more like Henry's way of communicating the truth about what happened to his daughter, ensuring that anyone who reaches the true ending understands the full scope of the tragedy they're helping to resolve. The cassette player itself, that device sitting on your desk throughout the game, represents Henry's presence without requiring his physical appearance. He's been planning this for years, recording instructions for every contingency, preparing for the moment when all the pieces would finally be in position. The player might believe they're making independent choices about what to salvage, what to purchase, how to arrange the pizzeria, but in reality, all roads lead to the same conclusion. All 4 animatronics gathered in one location, a manager present to maintain operations through the week, and Henry ready to spring the trap that will end this cycle of possession and suffering once and for all. The week's timing is deliberate. 6 days provides enough time for all 4 salvage opportunities to occur, for the pizzeria to be built into something believable and operational, for the animatronics to settle in and lower whatever guards they might have against the possibility of this being a trap. But it's not so long that complications arise, that the animatronics' conflicting motivations cause them to turn on each other or leave. That word spreads about this new location and brings unwanted attention from authorities or survivors who might recognize what's really happening. Henry's plan accounts for casualties. He knows the player character is in danger throughout the week. He knows that completing this plan will require sacrifice, potentially including himself. The speech he delivers at the end acknowledges this, addressing each animatronic with understanding of their nature, while also condemning William Afton, specifically for his crimes. Henry isn't trying to punish the possessed children or his own daughter. He's trying to release them, to give them the peaceful end they were denied when their lives were stolen and their spirits bound to machines. The use of fire as the method of destruction connects to Remnant's properties. Fire is how remnant is maintained at the proper temperature for injection. But fire is also what can destroy it if the temperature exceeds that threshold. Henry isn't just burning down a pizzeria. He's creating an inferno hot enough to break the supernatural bonds keeping these spirits trapped, hot enough to destroy the remnant itself, ensuring that this time, when the animatronics are destroyed, the spirits within can actually move on rather than remaining anchored to whatever remnants of their vessel survive. The labyrinth design that Henry mentions in his final speech refers to both the physical layout of the pizzeria, with its vents and rooms creating a maze the animatronics navigate during their hunts, and the larger psychological maze he's created, where the animatronics believe they're operating with free will and purpose, when in reality, they're following a path he designed specifically for them. It's a maze with no exit because Henry doesn't intend for anyone to leave. Every door is locked, every escape route sealed, every path leading deeper into the building rather than toward freedom. This level of planning, this willingness to manipulate even his own daughter's spirit to achieve his goal, speaks to how deeply Henry's guilt and determination run. He couldn't save Charlotte when she was alive. He couldn't stop William before the murders occurred. He couldn't prevent the children from being possessed or protect them from spending decades in mechanical prisons. But he can do this. He can gather everyone together. He can maintain control over the situation one final time. And he can end it. The cost is high, potentially his own life. Definitely the destruction of everything he built with William all those years ago. But Henry has clearly decided the cost is acceptable if it means releasing these souls from their torment. The multiple endings. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator contains several distinct endings depending on how you've played through the game, each offering different perspectives on the story's conclusion and varying levels of resolution for the conflicts that have built throughout the week. These endings aren't simply variations on a theme, but rather reflect fundamentally different outcomes based on choices and completions, ranging from utter failure to achieve anything meaningful to the bittersweet triumph of Henry's complete plan. The mediocrity ending represents the most basic conclusion, achieved by essentially doing the bare minimum throughout the game. If you salvage 0 animatronics and purchase no items that increase your pizzeria's Faz rating, effectively running the most basic possible establishment without growth or ambition, you reach the end of the week having accomplished nothing of significance. The screen displays a certificate of mediocrity, acknowledging that yes, technically, you completed the week, but you did so without engaging with any of the game's larger purposes. You didn't gather the animatronics, didn't build a successful pizzeria, didn't participate in Henry's plan in any meaningful way. This ending is almost insulting in its plainness, offering no story resolution, no final speeches, no closure. You showed up, did the absolute minimum, and left. In a game about confronting legacy and ending cycles of tragedy, this ending represents total abdication of responsibility and purpose. The blacklisted ending occurs when you've bought too many risky items and incurred too many lawsuits without properly managing them. Your pizzeria becomes a legal nightmare, a liability that Fazbear Entertainment can no longer afford to associate with. The screen shows your establishment being shut down, your franchise license revoked, your name added to some corporate blacklist that prevents you from ever trying this again. Like the mediocrity ending, this offers no story resolution because you failed to maintain the facade of legitimacy long enough for Henry's plan to come to fruition. You've drawn too much attention, caused too many problems, and forced the whole operation to shut down before the trap could spring. This ending feels like failure through incompetence rather than through deliberate choice, suggesting you couldn't handle the basic requirements of the job, let alone the hidden purpose behind it. The bad ending, also called the terminated ending, occurs when you successfully complete the week, but have failed to gather all 4 key animatronics. Maybe you threw some of them back during salvage, unwilling to risk having them in your building. Maybe you never purchased Lefty from the rare finds auction, and he never appeared for salvage. Whatever the specific circumstance, you reach Saturday night having missed at least one crucial piece of Henry's plan, and he's disappointed in you. The cassette man's voice returns for this ending, but instead of the elaborate final speech that accompanies the completion ending, you receive a terse message. He thanks you for completing the week, but immediately fires you for failing to complete your most important objective. The tone is professional, but unmistakably disappointed, like a teacher who expected better from a student who showed promise. You're dismissed, told to collect your things and leave, and the game ends without resolution. The animatronics you did gather remain trapped and hunting. The ones you didn't gather remain out in the world, dangerous and aimless, and the cycle continues. Henry's plan has failed because you didn't execute your part properly, and now he'll have to find another way, another time, another opportunity that may never come. This ending punishes players who are too cautious or made poor decisions about salvage, emphasizing that the game's true purpose requires commitment and risk, not just survival. The insanity ending is perhaps the strangest of all the conclusions, hidden behind a specific item and a specific action that most players would never discover without guidance or extreme experimentation. During one of your catalog purchasing phases, you need to buy an item called Egg Baby and place it in your pizzeria. This item is exactly what it sounds like. A baby's head emerging from an egg, as disturbing as it is nonsensical, fitting perfectly into the franchise's tradition of bizarre and unsettling character designs. Once Egg Baby is placed and you've completed that night's tasks, you return to the office for the next night shift and notice something different. The button on the left side of your computer monitor, which normally does nothing or serves some minor function, has turned blue. If you click this button while shutting down your systems to reboot, if you hold it down during the reboot process, the game triggers a hidden audio file. This is Henry's voice, but not the cassette man persona he's maintained throughout the week. This is Henry speaking in first person, addressing someone directly, possibly William, possibly himself, possibly the player. The speech is fragmented, discussing remnant and experiments and the mistakes that led to this point. He talks about discoveries made, boundaries crossed, and the terrible knowledge gained from trying to understand what William did and how to undo it. The blueprints flash on screen, showing detailed schematics of the scooper device, remnant injection systems, and the internal mechanisms of various animatronics. These blueprints have become beloved by the lore community for the information they contain about how remnant functions, how it was extracted and implanted, and how the possession process works on a mechanical level. The game ends after this audio plays, returning you to the main menu without further ceremony. This ending doesn't advance the story in any traditional sense, but instead provides lore details and context for understanding the broader mechanics of the FNAF universe. It's an optional glimpse behind the curtain, showing the research Henry conducted and the knowledge he gained. But it doesn't change the outcome of the main narrative. You still need to achieve one of the other endings for resolution. The insanity ending exists alongside them, supplementary rather than alternative. The completion ending, also called the good ending, is what Henry has been working toward throughout the entire game. To achieve this ending, you must successfully complete the week with all 4 key animatronics present in your pizzeria. It doesn't matter if you salvage them all, or if some entered through other means like purchasing Lefty, or having them sneak in through markdown items. What matters is that, by Saturday night, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Scraptrap, and Lefty are all gathered in one location, trapped in the labyrinth Henry created, unable to escape when the true plan finally activates. The ending sequence begins with darkness and Scrap Baby's voice. She sounds triumphant, believing she's successfully executed her own plan. "You played right into our hands," she tells you. "Did you really think that this job just fell out of the sky for you? No. This was a gift, for us. You gathered them all together in one place, just like he asked you to." Her words reveal that she believes William sent you, that her father orchestrated this gathering, so the animatronics could finally achieve whatever dark purpose they've been working toward. She talks about completing their work, about making Daddy proud, about finally being able to do what they were created to do. Her voice carries satisfaction and anticipation, the culmination of what she thinks is a plan years in the making. Then comes the beep. A single electronic tone cuts through her speech, interrupting her mid-sentence, and the cassette man's voice takes over. "Connection terminated," he begins, and with those 2 words, everything Scrap Baby thought she understood shatters. Henry Emily is about to deliver one of the most emotionally resonant and story-defining speeches in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and it's worth examining in detail because of how completely it recontextualizes everything that came before. Henry's final speech and the fire. Connection terminated. "I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed." Henry's opening directly addresses Scrap Baby, using Elizabeth Afton's real name, reminding her of her identity before she became trapped in that mechanical body. It's both compassionate and devastating, acknowledging her humanity while also highlighting how much she's lost, how she might not even remember being Elizabeth anymore after years of existing as Circus Baby and then Scrap Baby. The apology feels genuine despite what's about to happen, as if Henry regrets the necessity of this but knows there's no other way. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. This correction dismantles Elizabeth's understanding of the situation immediately. She believed William summoned everyone here for some purpose aligned with his experiments and desires. Henry confirms she was called, but not by her father, and not for the reasons she imagined. The gathering was deliberate, but it was Henry's design, not William's, and the purpose is completely opposite to what Elizabeth hoped. You have all been called here into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection and misfortune. Henry describes the pizzeria in its true nature, not as a restaurant or a hunting ground, but as a trap, a maze designed to confuse and contain. The sounds and smells are the lures that drew them in, the audio systems and ventilation, and the promise of prey. The misdirection is the entire facade of a real establishment, the management simulation that made it seem like someone was genuinely trying to run a business. The misfortune is what awaits them all now that the trap has been sprung. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. This is perhaps the cruelest revelation. The animatronics have been trapped since they entered, but they've been so focused on their own goals, their own hunts and purposes, that they never recognize the walls closing in. There's no way out, never was, and the prize they thought they were working toward doesn't exist. They've been manipulated completely, and they didn't even realize it until this moment when Henry's voice explains what they should have seen all along. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. Henry understands what drives the possessed animatronics, that need to attack adults, that confused perception that sees night guards as threats or targets. He describes their endless hunt as futile, a chase after something they'll never catch, because their targets were never real to begin with. It's a damning assessment of how possession has trapped them in repetitive, meaningless violence, unable to achieve anything beyond perpetuating the cycle that imprisoned them. This is where your story ends. Simple, direct, final. No ambiguity, no chance of escape or continuation. Every thread of story that led to this moment terminates here in this pizzeria that will soon become a furnace. Henry's speech then addresses specific individuals in turn, and these personal messages reveal the depth of his understanding and the weight of his guilt. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you, although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. This addresses the player character directly, Michael Afton in community interpretation. Henry acknowledges that Michael could have left, that there was an exit designed into the plan for him, but Henry suspects correctly that Michael won't take it. After everything Michael has been through, after being used by Ennard, after surviving as an undead entity, after searching for his father and trying to undo the damage his family caused, Michael won't run when given the chance to end it. Henry respects this choice, while also recognizing its tragedy. Michael doesn't have to die here, but he's going to anyway. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. This is both acknowledgement and absolution. Michael wants to face his father, to ensure William can't hurt anyone else, to perhaps atone for his own role in his brother's death years ago. Henry understands these motivations and doesn't try to dissuade him. If Michael wants to stay, Henry accepts that, even as it means Michael will burn alongside everyone else. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. Henry reveals that he won't escape either. He's physically present somewhere close to the pizzeria, close enough to ensure the plan executes properly, close enough to burn when the flames start. This isn't a remote detonation where Henry triggers the fire and walks away. He's committed to this completely, willing to die alongside everyone else because this is his responsibility, his mess to clean up, his chance to finally protect his daughter by releasing her. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. Henry wants this entire chapter of history forgotten, wants the pizzeria and the restaurant chain, and the entire legacy of Fazbear Entertainment to disappear from public consciousness. The tragedies have generated enough suffering without becoming part of cultural memory. And Henry hopes that by destroying everything in this fire, by leaving no evidence or remnants, the specific details can fade, even if the general warning about safety and vigilance remains. And to you, monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. This addresses the possessed animatronics as a group, calling them monsters not out of cruelty, but accuracy. They've become dangerous creatures driven by confusion and rage, and Henry is offering them release. The spirits they carry, the children's souls that were never supposed to be trapped this way, don't belong to these machines. They belong to those children, and it's time to return them, to separate the mechanical from the spiritual, and let each go to its proper destination. For most of you, I believe there is peace and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Henry acknowledges that the children deserve rest, that their suffering should end in peace rather than continued torment. The perhaps more suggests Henry believes in some form of afterlife, something beyond this physical existence where Charlotte and the other children can go once they're freed from their animatronic prisons. It's a hopeful note amid the tragedy, a belief that this ending is better than the alternative of eternal imprisonment. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. This is addressed directly to William Afton, and it's the only part of the speech where Henry's voice carries open hostility. Everyone else receives compassion or understanding, but William gets damnation. Henry believes in hell, believes William deserves it, and believes this fire will send William there. The old friend is bitterly ironic, acknowledging their partnership, while condemning what William became. Henry isn't offering William release or peace. He's offering judgment and eternal torment, the only fate Henry considers appropriate for the man who killed his daughter and countless other children. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. This is the emotional heart of the entire speech. Henry addresses Charlotte directly, acknowledging her nature, her protective instincts that drove her even in death to help other children. He apologizes for failing to save her, for not being there when she needed him, even as he recognizes that she spent decades doing exactly what he failed to do, protecting others. The parallel between her lifting children to safety and his failure to lift at her is devastating in its directness. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to just disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. Henry understands that Charlotte couldn't move on, that her nature wouldn't allow her to abandon other children to the same fate she suffered. He should have predicted this, should have known his daughter well enough to anticipate that death wouldn't stop her from trying to help. But now, finally, he can do what he couldn't do that rainy night outside the pizzeria. He can save her, not from death, but from the burden of being unable to die, from the prison of the puppet, from the responsibility she's carried for so long. It's time to rest, for you and for those you have carried in your arms. This is release and permission. Charlotte can stop now. She doesn't have to protect anyone anymore. The children she's kept anchored to this world can finally move on. All of them can rest. It's the closure Henry couldn't give her in life, the peace he's fought for years to provide, and now, in this final moment, he's achieved it. The screen fades to black as Henry's speech concludes, and images from previous games flash briefly. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the location from FNAF 2, Fazbear's Fright, all the places where this story played out, appearing and disappearing like memories. Then flames begin to rise, animated fire consuming the screen as the temperature in the pizzeria increases beyond the threshold where Remnant can maintain its bonds. The animatronics don't scream or beg. There's no dramatic final stand or desperate escape attempt. They were right where Henry said they were, trapped in a labyrinth with no exit, and now the walls are burning around them. Scrap Baby, who thought she was gathering souls for her father's purpose. Molten Freddy, carrying the fragmented remnants of the original missing children. Scraptrap, William Afton in his decayed spring bonnie shell, finally facing consequences he avoided for decades. Lefty, containing the puppet, containing Charlotte, finally being released from her protective vigil. The fire consumes everything. The animatronics' physical forms burn away. The remnant binding the spirits is destroyed by the heat. The building itself becomes an inferno that leaves nothing salvageable. Henry remains nearby as he promised, ensuring the fire does its work, perhaps perishing in the flames himself, or simply staying close enough to confirm no one escapes. Michael, if the player character is indeed him, burns alongside everyone else, his undead body finally finding true death after years of shambling existence maintained only by remnant. The completion certificate appears after the flames, acknowledging that yes, you did it. You successfully executed Henry's plan and brought closure to this decades-long tragedy. But the certificate feels hollow compared to what was just lost. Children finally found peace, but they're still dead, still victims who deserve better. Charlotte is free from the puppet, but she's still gone, still lost to Henry forever. William is presumably in hell, but he still murdered multiple children and corrupted his own daughter and destroyed countless lives. Michael finally confronted his father and ensured he couldn't hurt anyone else. But Michael's dead too, another victim of this family's dysfunction. The fire at the end of Pizzeria Simulator was supposed to be final, supposed to end the cycle of tragedy and possession that began when William Afton killed Charlotte Emily outside that original restaurant. Henry designed it to be definitive, to burn hot enough to destroy remnant, to trap everyone in one location where escape was impossible, to finally provide the release that had been denied for so long. And in many ways, it succeeded. The children's souls were freed. Charlotte was released from her burden. The animatronics were destroyed beyond recovery. But fires in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe have a way of not being as final as they seem. Scraptrap survived the fire at Fazbear's Fright. William Afton has proven remarkably resistant to permanent death. His consciousness and remnant-infused remains clinging to existence even when all logic suggests he should finally be gone. And indeed, later entries in the franchise would suggest that this fire at Pizzeria Simulator, while accomplishing much of what Henry intended, didn't quite manage to eliminate every trace of William Afton's presence. But that's a story for another time, for other games. In the moment of Pizzeria Simulator's completion ending, the fire achieves what Henry set out to do. It ends his story, Charlotte's story, and Michael's story, with the only form of peace available: oblivion. The Lawkeeper ending. Beyond the multiple endings that conclude the business simulation and survival horror gameplay, Pizzeria Simulator contains one final secret ending that doesn't change the outcome, but adds a crucial visual element to the story's closure. The Lawkeeper ending, also called the Gravestone ending, is achieved by completing all 3 hidden lore minigames: Fruity Maze, Midnight Motorist, and Security Puppet. Discovering all their secrets, seeing all their revelations about the past, earns you a special certificate labeled "You are the Lawkeeper," and unlocks this final scene. After the completion ending plays out, after Henry's speech and the fire, the screen fades to show a peaceful hill shrouded in mist. The atmosphere is quiet, serene. a stark contrast to the flames and violence that preceded it. On this hill sit 6 gravestones, simple markers standing in a row, and each one represents a soul that was trapped in the animatronics, now finally at rest. The gravestones are arranged specifically, and their positions and details have been analyzed extensively by the community seeking to understand who each one represents. 3 of the gravestones face forward, clearly legible, their names visible: Gabriel, Jeremy, and Susie. These are 3 of the missing children from the 1985 incident. The children William Afton murdered and stuffed into animatronic suits, whose spirits possessed Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica respectively. Seeing their names here, on peaceful graves on a quiet hill, provides closure that the franchise had never given them before. They're no longer just the missing children, no longer just angry spirits haunting animatronics. They were Gabriel and Jeremy and Susie, children with names and identities, and now they're resting properly, their stories complete. 2 more gravestones are positioned at angles where their names aren't fully visible from the camera's perspective, but community analysis and later official sources have confirmed their identities: Fritz and Cassidy. Fritz possessed Foxy, the pirate animatronic, completing the set of the original 4 animatronics from the first game. Cassidy's presence is more complex, as various sources have suggested she possessed Golden Freddy, the mysterious 5th animatronic that doesn't quite follow the same rules as the others. The name Cassidy itself became a major revelation for the community when this ending was discovered, as previously the identity of Golden Freddy's possessing spirit had been unknown or debated. The 6th gravestone, positioned at the top of the hill, overlooking the others, is also angled away from the clear view, but it's been confirmed to represent Charlotte Emily, Henry's daughter. Her position watching over the other 5 mirrors her role in the story. She was the puppet, the protector, the one who gave life to the others by helping their spirits possess the animatronics after William murdered them. Even in death, even in this peaceful rest, Charlotte maintains her protective vigil, positioned above the children she spent so long trying to save, ensuring they're safe even now. The scene is accompanied by gentle music, soft and melancholic, as the camera slowly pans across the gravestones. There's no dialogue, no further exposition. The image speaks for itself. These 6 souls, trapped for decades in mechanical bodies, confused and angry and unable to move on, have finally found peace. The fire did what Henry intended. It released them from their prisons, separated their spirits from the remnant and animatronics that bound them to the physical world, and allowed them to finally rest properly. Some interpretations suggest the hill itself is symbolic, that this isn't a literal graveyard where their physical remains are buried, but rather a metaphorical representation of their souls being at peace. Their bodies were never recovered in most versions of the story, stuffed into animatronics and eventually destroyed or lost. But their spirits are now resting, and that's what matters. The peaceful hill in the mist represents the afterlife, or at least the release from suffering, a place beyond the fires and tragedies and possessions that defined their existences for so long. The absence of William Afton from this peaceful scene is deliberate and significant. Henry's speech specifically condemned William to hell, not rest, and the gravestone ending reinforces this distinction. The children get peace. Charlotte gets to watch over them one final time. But William gets nothing. No marker, no memorial, no peaceful image. He's simply gone, hopefully to the damnation Henry promised him. His exclusion from this final scene emphasizes that while the children were victims deserving of sympathy and release, William was a monster deserving only of punishment and oblivion. Michael Afton is also absent from the gravestones, though his fate is less clear. Some interpretations suggest Michael simply doesn't get a marker because he wasn't technically a victim in the same way the children were. He chose to stay in that burning pizzeria, chose to sacrifice himself to ensure his father couldn't escape. Others suggest that Michael's soul, sustained by a remnant for so long, might not have achieved the same clean release that the children did. His ending might have been death without the peace, cessation without rest. Or perhaps he's watching from somewhere else, finally able to move on knowing he helped end the cycle his father started. The Lawkeeper ending serves multiple purposes within the game's narrative structure. It rewards players who engage deeply with the lore, who discovered all 3 hidden minigames and unraveled their secrets. It provides emotional closure by showing the children at rest rather than leaving their ultimate fate ambiguous. It confirms identities and names that had been speculated about for years in the community. And it offers a final image of peace to counterbalance all the horror and suffering that preceded it. A gentle reminder that despite everything, the children ultimately found their way home. The certificate that comes with this ending is labeled "You are the Lawkeeper," directly addressing the player's role not just in the game, but in the broader franchise. By discovering these hidden stories, by piecing together the fragmented narrative, by understanding the connections between minigames and main story, you've become a keeper of this fictional history, a guardian of these tragic stories. It's a recognition that engaging with FNAF lore requires dedication and attention, and that those who pursue it completely are performing a valuable function in preserving and understanding the narrative Scott Cawthon created. Legacy and closing thoughts, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, represents a unique culmination point in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. A game that serves simultaneously as mainline entry, lore dump, conclusion to multiple story threads, and meta-commentary on the nature of the series itself. Released as a free game disguised as a spin-off tycoon simulator, it delivered some of the franchise's most important revelations, while also providing one of its most emotionally resonant conclusions. The game's multi-layered structure, with its tycoon phase, survival horror night shifts, salvage procedures, and hidden minigames, created an experience unlike any other FNAF entry before or since. The decision to make the game free was significant, removing any barrier to entry for fans who wanted to experience the conclusion to this chapter of the story. Scott Cawthon could have charged for a game this substantial, this filled with content and revelations, but instead, he chose to release it as a gift to the community that had supported the franchise since its inception in 2014. This generosity, combined with the surprise nature of the release and the elaborate trolling involved in disguising the true game behind a fake tycoon simulator, demonstrated Cawthon's understanding of his audience and his willingness to play with expectations and conventions. The game's reception was largely positive, with critics and fans praising its ambitious blend of gameplay styles and its significant lore contributions. Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Game Crate specifically highlighted the effective combination of business simulation and survival horror, noting how the two modes complemented each other thematically and mechanically. PC Gamer praised the game's value proposition, pointing out that for a free release, it offered remarkable depth and content. The Steam community reviews reflect this appreciation, with the game maintaining a very positive rating with over 93% positive reviews out of nearly 20,000 total reviews as of recent statistics. Within the FNAF community, Pizzeria Simulator is often considered one of the franchise's strongest entries from a lore perspective. Henry's final speech has become iconic, frequently quoted and referenced in discussions about the series' themes and emotional core. The completion ending's effectiveness in providing closure while maintaining the series' tragic tone earned it widespread acclaim as a fitting conclusion to the story arc that began with the original game. The hidden minigames, particularly Fruity Maze and Security Puppet, filled in crucial gaps in the timeline and provided concrete details about events that had previously been implied or speculated about. However, the game wasn't without its criticisms. Some players found the salvage procedures repetitive after the first encounter, noting that while the initial experience with each animatronic was tense and atmospheric, repeated attempts to successfully complete the audio test became tedious exercises in pattern recognition rather than genuine horror. The random nature of Candy Cadet's stories frustrated players trying to achieve the Lawkeeper ending, with many spending hours clicking through his minigame, hoping to trigger the story sequences. The night shift difficulty, particularly on Saturday with all 4 animatronics active, led to complaints about the task-based system feeling unfair when combined with constant animatronic threats and random advertisement pop-ups. The mysteries left unsolved, particularly Midnight Motorist, became points of contention within the community. While some appreciated the ambiguity and the ongoing debates it sparked, others felt frustrated that a game meant to provide closure instead introduced new questions without definitive answers. The identity of Orange Guy, the significance of JRs, the nature of the runaway child's destination, all of these remain subject to interpretation rather than confirmation, maintaining the series' tradition of cryptic storytelling, even in a game largely focused on resolution. The game's position in the franchise timeline became clearer with subsequent releases. While Pizzeria Simulator was intended as a definitive conclusion to the story that began with the original Five Nights at Freddy's, later entries revealed that the fire didn't quite eliminate all threats, that remnant and possession mechanics are more resilient than even Henry understood, and that William Afton's influence continues beyond what should have been his final destruction. Ultimate Custom Night, released as a free update in 2018, expanded on the game with 50 animatronics and suggested that William might be trapped in a nightmare of his own, punished but not eliminated. Help Wanted in 2019 and Security Breach in 2021 continued the story into new eras and locations, proving that while Pizzeria Simulator concluded one chapter, the larger franchise had more stories to tell, but within its own scope, within the story it chose to tell. Pizzeria Simulator succeeded in providing the closure that Henry sought for himself, Charlotte, and the missing children. The fire burned, the spirits were released, and the cycle of possession that had perpetuated suffering for decades finally came to an end. The children found peace. Charlotte was freed from her protective burden. Michael confronted his father and ensured William couldn't hurt anyone else, and Henry sacrificed himself to make it all possible. It's a tragic ending, filled with death and loss, but it's the right ending for a story that began with child murder and mechanical imprisonment. The game's themes of responsibility, guilt, and the cost of trying to undo past mistakes resonate throughout the experience. Henry's plan requires manipulation and deception, using even his own daughter's spirit as a component in his trap. Michael chooses to die rather than escape, accepting that his role in his family's tragedy demands this final sacrifice. The children, victims who deserved none of what happened to them, can only find peace through destruction. Their spirits released by the same method, fire, that created and maintained the remnant binding them. Every character pays a price, and that price is earned through the choices they made or the circumstances they couldn't control. For players willing to engage with the game's full complexity, to discover the hidden minigames and piece together the story from fragments of cassette recordings and brief glimpses into the past, Pizzeria Simulator offers one of the franchise's richest narratives. It rewards attention and persistence, revealing layers of meaning in seemingly simple details like catalog descriptions, lawsuit text, and arcade machine aesthetics. The game understands that its audience has spent years analyzing and theorizing, and it respects that investment by providing substantial material to analyze and theorize about. As we close out this complete exploration of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator's lore, from the surprise release, to the deceptive beginning, to the salvage procedures, to the hidden minigames, to Henry's final speech, and the peaceful hill where 6 souls finally rest, it's worth reflecting on what makes this entry special in the broader franchise. It's a game about endings, about confronting the consequences of past actions, about finding whatever form of peace is possible when the innocent have suffered and the guilty have evaded justice for too long. It's a game that understands the weight of its own history, the dozens of victims and tragedies that accumulated across the series, and it takes that weight seriously even as it provides moments of dark humor and meta-commentary about restaurant management. Whether you experience this yourself, playing through those 6 nights and discovering the secrets hidden in arcade machines and salvage rooms, or whether you've experienced it through this telling, through this slow unwinding of the full story from beginning to end, the core truth remains. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is a game about bringing things to a close, about finally, after decades of suffering and searching and attempting to undo what can never truly be undone, finding a way to end the cycle and let the dead rest. It's a bittersweet achievement, purchased at terrible cost, but for Henry and Charlotte and Michael and the 5 missing children, it was the only piece available. And sometimes, in the 5 Nights at Freddy's universe, the only piece available is still worth fighting for, even if it means walking into the fire yourself to ensure the flames burn hot enough to set everyone free. If you enjoyed this journey through the complete lore of Pizzeria Simulator, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories to tell, more games to explore, more quiet hours to fill with voices in the dark, slowly unfolding these tales of mechanical horror and human tragedy. Until next time, rest well, and remember that even in stories this dark, sometimes peace is possible if you're willing to pay the price to achieve it. Good night.